Welcome to Nuke 101. Today we're going to start by looking at the basics of the Nuke interface and some of the basic nodes we use in everyday compositing. Okay, to begin with, you'll want to navigate to where your Nuke application is located. On Mac, that's going to be in the Applications folder, and you'll want to find the folder that says Nuke 11.0 v1 or whichever version of Nuke you have installed. Right now it's August 2017, and Nuke 11 v1 is the latest version. You'll want to go ahead and use the NukeX non-commercial or the Nuke Studio non-commercial. I prefer to use the NukeX and the Hero combination. Nuke Studio is both of these combined into one app, but you know, it's going to be easier to just focus on Nuke, so go ahead and open either a NukeX or a Nuke non-commercial, but NukeX is going to have greater capabilities. So once you double click and open that, you're going to get this window here, and you have one node in your node graph, which is a viewer. You'll see if it's not on the screen, it's in this little area here showing you a little layout of your full node graph. Then over here on the right is your properties panel. Whenever you have a node's properties open, any kind of controls that it has available will be populated over here. Again, this is the node graph. This viewer node links to this viewer tab. You can create multiple viewers, and to do so you would go up to this draw menu. This is your node menus over here. These are all the nodes you can create to do various compositing operations. So you have your color menu, your filter menu, this is your color channel menu, your keyer menu, etc. And this is basically your image menu. So a viewer is under there as an image. When you create a second viewer, creates a second viewer node and a second viewer window. It may float that window, or it may create it in this panel, viewer 1 and viewer 2. You can click on this gray box, which allows you to split panels horizontally or vertically. You can float the pane, which basically does exactly what we just did. It floats it like this, so now it's totally disconnected. So we can go ahead and dock things like that, and this will create it on the top half, and this creates it in the whole window. Let's go ahead and put those back in there. You can close the whole pane. You can float a tab, which will just float that one viewer. And if you split horizontally, it creates a second one over there, so you can have your second viewer there, side-by-side monitors. You can go ahead and close the pane, so close pane, there you go. And when you close the viewer 1, it deletes the viewer 1. So if we go ahead and delete this viewer as well, it deletes this viewer from this panel. Let's go ahead and create another viewer. It recreates viewer 1 and puts it in there. And it's currently not displaying anything because it's obviously there's nothing in here for it to display. So let's go ahead and also create a color wheel. And as you can see, when we created this, it immediately opens its properties in the property bin. And it has these controls available to you, and we're not seeing it because the viewer needs to be attached to it. So you can grab this little pipe here and attach it, and then once it's attached, it's going to display in the viewer window. And let's go ahead and just fiddle around with this. We can rotate it, we can adjust the gamma of it, we can adjust the edge blur or the center blur, and the edge saturation, and the center saturation. So if we go ahead and gamma that back up, so center saturation, edge saturation, center saturation. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, to save, you go to File, Save Comp As. You can't see my file menu because I'm displaying Nuke on my second monitor. My main monitor is 4K, and for this recording, it would probably make everything really tiny. You can also hit Command S, and that would save the comp to the location you choose. But let's go ahead and create a read node. The hotkey for that is R. So if you press R, it'll create that node. Let me just grab this and resize it a little bit. And the read node will allow you to navigate to a path where an image is located, that you can then select that image and create a node with it. So let's go to Drupal 1 just for a second, and then if you press this, it'll go back to where you just were, this file path here, in this volume, in this folder, in this folder, in this folder, etc. If you hit this, it actually just goes back. So if I hit it right now, it's in the images, it's going to go back to class 3. If I hit it again, it'll go back to drive, back, back, back. Now, these folders, you can add, so these folders are saved places where you can browse for things. To add one, let's say you just want to add this bento backup as somewhere you like to browse for images, just hit the plus button and then select if it's an image browser, a miscellaneous browser. You can have multiple of these selected, or all of them, or just one. Suppose you save all your projects in this location, or all your scripts. A Nuke script is what we call a project. A project is more likely referring to a hero project. So let's just hit cancel on that, and let's go to volumes and just navigate to know where you know that the footage for class 1 is, and it's in image ingest, this folder. So I'm going to select this. You can preview it at the bottom. Just hit open, and you can see that it immediately populates the properties bin with the options for that. Now, if we select it, we can drag the viewer over to view it, or we can press 2, which creates another path to the viewer, and then we can toggle between them, 1 and 2, or we can change this middle thing to wipe and stack. If we change it to stack, it stacks the two under, over, minus, which is difference. Minus is the same as difference, or onion skin. If we go wipe, and we select the color wheel here, and we just go ahead with under, we can now wipe between the two images. So that's what that's doing. So let's go back to this now. Basically what we have here is the format, which is of course the size of the image, a proxy format if we're using a proxy, the frame range of the clip, and an expression that allows you to tell it to start at a different frame. It's very common to start at frame 1001, but for this we're just going to go ahead and leave it as is on expression with nothing in it. If you move it so that it does start at frame 1001, it tells you the original frame range. You can also change the frame range here, make it go from frame 5 to frame 100, and it will still tell you the original frame range. And it allows you to choose the color space. sRGB is the default for DNG. You may know that this was encoded in Rec 709. red log, or S-log for Sony cameras, and so on and so forth. Now, the second way to get footage into Nuke, besides using the read node, is simply to drag a folder with an image sequence in. Let's go to the one viewer, and we have this dog here. Now, if we're moving frames here, we can see that this image is not moving, and it also is not showing read to in the properties bin. So let's go ahead and double click and open read to. We can use this little triangle to twirl these up and, to twirl these closed. And we can see that this actually starts at frame 100 and goes to frame 200. And again, read 1 starts at frame 0 and goes to 100. So what we could do to line these up is we could either use the expression start at frame 0. So again, start at frame 0. Or we can go into the dope sheet and we can see read 2 starts here at frame 100. We can physically grab it and move it over to frame 0. And when we do that, it's putting the offset of 100 frames in there. If we change that to expression start at 100, offset 100 frames. Okay, there it is. So you can physically move things around in the dope sheet. When you set keyframes, keyframes will also be displayed in here. Keyframes will also be displayed in the curve editor where you can adjust their slope. And again, back to the node graph. So, an application like After Effects or Final Cut, Premiere, various editing software usually comes with an image that has a default set of controls. For example, the ability to translate it and rotate it and set the opacity. The defaults for this node are just setting the color and the frame range, as this read node is only controlling the file. So to move this image around, what we'll need to do is create a transform node. So to create a transform node, you can simply press T, or you can grab it from the top of the transform menu. So once the transform node is connected to the read node, the transform node will translate or rotate. It basically will affect everything above it. So if we change the scale of this node, then we can see that it's adjusting the scale and the rotation of this node. If we were to put the squirrel or the dog over the squirrel with a merge node located in this menu, M for merge, say we put A over B, we're not seeing anything because we're still looking through this transform node. So let's look at the results of this A over B. And this is strange. We seem to have two images superimposed over each other, and we would expect this image to be completely occluding this image since it's the same size. If we look at the operations, if we hover our mouse over any drop-down menu, it'll bring up these tips, and we can look at the operation. If we look down at the over, it's A plus B. It's A plus B times 1 minus A. So there's no A in the B pipe or the A pipe. So what we'll need to do here is add an alpha channel. And we can see that the transform adds this white block, which is an alpha, but in these read nodes, they're just red, green, and blue. Again, red, green, and blue, no alpha channel. So what we'll want to do here is go to the channel menu and create the shuffle node. And once we drop the shuffle node in there, it's basically taking the red and mapping it to the red, the green channel and mapping it to the green, and the blue and mapping it to the blue. Let's go ahead and look through this for a moment. If we map all the channels to the red, it creates black and white. The same with mapping all the channels to the green or mapping them all to the blue. So it creates different black and whites. So we can remap our channels, but what we really want to do here is, instead of taking whatever the default alpha is, we want to flood it with white. So if we go back here and look at the alpha channel, it's empty, so it's showing me black. But if we go ahead and flood it with white, it's now showing me white. Now, when we go back down to our merge operation, it's now put, so again, we're moving the viewer here, it's now put this image completely over the top of the squirrel image. So that's a good tip. Whenever you're working with, whenever you're working in Nuke, it's good to just start out by flooding the alpha channel with white. And you can copy a node by hitting Command C. So Command C to copy and Command V to paste. And then simply connect it and flood the alpha channel with white. So again, alpha channel white, the squirrel, no alpha channel flooded with white, and then A over B. Now, if we unhook our transform node and drop it right over the middle of these lines, now it's dropped. Now it's affecting everything upstream of it. If we hit Command Shift X to pop that node out, we can move it down. Now it's affecting everything upstream. It's transforming both this and both this, which, so Command Shift X and then let's copy it, Command C, Command V. So now if we had the exact same transform node on the squirrel, we would get the same result as putting the transform node down here and transforming them both together. Now, that's basically an important concept to wrap your head around, is that whatever you do affects everything upstream. So let's create another useful and popular node. Let's create a blur. But let's take this transform off. And let's go ahead and create a roto node from the draw menu. We want to draw a roto shape. So O is the hotkey. P for paint, O for roto. So let's go ahead and put the roto node in. Let's go ahead and put the roto node in above the transform and look through it. Now, to clear out your properties bin, just press this X and it'll clear everything. Alternatively, you can set it to only have one node open at a time by entering a 1 in this field, or you can set it to have 10 nodes open at a time, and you can basically choose however many properties you want. By default, it has the Bezier tool selected. You can create a Bezier, a cusp Bezier, a B-spline, an ellipse, a rectangle, a cusp rectangle, and open spline. I'd recommend that you look at Nuke's documentation to see what these various things do if you don't already know. So go ahead and start clicking points by left clicking and dragging to drag out the little control handles. And let's draw a roto shape around this dog. Now, normally they display in red. This seems to be a bit of a Nuke 11 UI error. See, that's how they, red, there they go. That's how they should normally display. Makes them very easy to see. So let's just go ahead and just real quick roto this out. Obviously, if this was a production, I would do a much better roto than this, and probably use multiple shapes for this dog's head. So now we're just seeing a shape with you know, nothing really happening. If we go ahead and look at this and press A independently, we can see that here's our shape of our dog. So it has created an alpha channel with the points that we drew. Let's drop it back in here, unselect alpha, and look at a few functions of the rotonode. If we go back to alpha for a moment, if we go ahead and click replace on the clip to format, we can see now that it's replaced our all flooded white alpha channel with this alpha channel that the rotonodes created. Alternatively, if we just want to cut the dog out, we can go ahead and pre-multiply it by RGBA. This is going to multiply the picture of the dog by the alpha channel. So any pixel that's colored is going to be multiplied by 1 in the red, green, and blue channels, and it's going to remain the same. Any pixel outside of the alpha channel is going to be multiplied by 0, which anything multiplied by 0 is 0. So if we pre-multiply this image, we then get a cutout of the dog. Now we've gone ahead and rotoed on frame 22, as you can see, and this is a moving image. So let's go ahead and go to the time menu where we manipulate the time of the footage, and let's get a frame hold node. A frame hold node allows us to hold an image on a certain frame, and it defaults to frame 0, but let's go ahead and type in frame 22 since that's the frame we rotoed on. So now every frame will be held on frame 22. And here's our transform node, which has now transformed our mask that we drew, and again, everything upstream of it. So now let's go ahead and close the properties of the frame hold and the roto since we're done with those. And again, look what we have here. Let's open our transform one more time and grab this middle handle and move it over here. And let's move it up to the corner there. Now, suppose that we want the dog's head to be slowly moving up from the bottom to this top position on frame 50. Let's go to frame 50, and in the transform node, let's set a key on by selecting this curve shape here. You can left click on that and hit set key, and you'll notice this box turns blue, indicating that a key is set on that box, as well as a blue mark in the timeline. And let's also key the rotation. Now if we go back to the beginning, it's a light blue, indicating that there's keys set on these parameters but not on these frames. If we go ahead and grab the middle again and drag it down out of frame, it disappears, but its information is still there as indicated by this bounding box. Nuke is still going to process this image, but outside of the visible viewing range. We can adjust the bounding box inside the merge node, if we wanted to limit the amount of image that Nuke processes. After all, this isn't visible, so we've now set new keyframes on this. Let's go ahead and change the rotation of it a little. And if we jump forward a few frames, we can see the dog's now animating up. Now if we go into the curve menu, we can see that on the translate X and Y, let's select those, hold our mouse over it and press F for fit. We can see that we have animation in Y that's basically a linear progression. It's not moving and then it starts moving at a constant speed all the way up. Let's add an ease in and an ease out to that. So let's select those. Actually, we can just select one and grab the handle of this and manipulate it, creating an ease in or an ease out. Alternatively, we can select it, right click on it, and interpolation select different interpolations. In this case, we want horizontal, which creates an ease in or an ease out. If we right click this and again select horizontal, it creates an ease in. Now we have the animation will ease in as it moves up. Let's go ahead at this point and hit Command S, which will bring up this saving dialog. So let's go to volumes and let's go into the location where we want to save this. I'm just going to call it class 1 001 underscore V001. I don't need to write .nk because it's going to put a .nk at the end for me. So now you can see at the top class 001 V001.nk. The V stands for version, and if you go to the file menu in the top left and go save new comp version or option shift S, you'll see it now goes to version 2. This is very handy for versioning up your work and saving different iterations of your scripts. So now let's say that we want to make the background of the squirrel a bit more blurry. Let's go ahead and again create a roto node. Now let's close the parameters for our transform and let's go to frame 1. And now this time let's just create an ellipse around the squirrel. Let's go ahead and just create it around the squirrel's body like this. And let's look through it. It seems to be in 2K Super 35. So if we hold our mouse over the node graph and press S, we bring up the project settings and we can see our full size format is in fact 2K Super 35. Let's go ahead and change that to the resolution of the plate, which is not a preset, but since we've read in this footage, it's automatically put it here for us. So it's 2400 by 1350. Let's go ahead and select that. And now our roto node and also probably our color wheel is going to default to that. See, our color wheel's changed to the root format. So let's go ahead and close the project settings now. And here's our roto. And if we look at the alpha channel, we can see we have this. Let's go ahead and control its blurriness on the edges by increasing the feather. Now, we'd like to increase the feather more than that. It only goes up to 100, but we can go ahead and type 200. We can go ahead and select it and type 250 in and create this here. Now, the way Nuke works is that we can have multiple channels in an image pipeline. If we go back here, right now we have a red, green, blue, and alpha channel as indicated by these boxes. On the keyboard, if you hold your mouse over the viewer, you can press red R to see the red channel, green or G to see the green channel, and B to see the blue channel. If you hold your mouse over the node graph, or if you hold your mouse cursor over the viewer, you can press R to see the red channel, green to see the blue channel, and B to see. Okay. If you hold your mouse cursor over the viewer area, you can press R to see the red channel, G to see the green channel, or B to see the blue channel, and A to see the alpha channel. You can click on the list of channels to see what channel sets and channels are in here available to look at. Now you have these other channels that are available by default in Nuke, but are not in this layer. Let's go ahead and create a copy node from the layer menu, K for copy, and it immediately connects the A for alpha to the roto node, which has our alpha channel in it. If we connect the B pipe to the shuffle node where we flooded the squirrel with alpha, and now we look into the copy node. We've now copied this alpha into the alpha going through this B pipe. So we've replaced this shuffle node's alpha with the alpha from this, essentially. But we don't want to do that. We want to keep the alpha solid white for now, and we want to go ahead and copy this channel's alpha to a different channel. We could create a new channel called oval.mat, for example, but let's just go ahead and choose mask.a. So now, if we look in this channel menu, now we have the mask channel, and we want to look in the red, and there's the mask.a populated into the red channel. So let's go again and look at the RGBA, and let's copy mask.a. Let's copy the mask.a into the B pipe. So let's go look at the RGBA layer again. Now we have this. Now we're looking at the results of our comp, and it doesn't look any different, but if we go again later on, we can see here's our dog animating up. Now we have this mask.a. Let's go ahead and blur the background of the squirrel to make the background more blurry. So we can create a blur node from the filter menu or by pressing B. And whenever you create a node, it immediately creates it below the selected node. So if no node is selected, it creates it wherever you have clicked last in the node graph. So let's delete those. Now let's blur this. So let's make it real blurry. Let's go ahead and make it 100. Now this is blurring the whole image. We really just want to blur the background. So let's go ahead and set the mask to mask.a. And that's not quite what we want. So let's go ahead and invert the mask. And now the area around the squirrel is blurry, and the squirrel is being held out by the mask.a. Now if we wanted to again add a transform node below the blur, you can see that the transform node is affecting everything above it. It's transforming the mask, it's transforming the blur, and it's transforming the squirrel. If we take that out and let's delete it, and now let's put a transform node below the merge and manipulate it, changing the scale, rotating it. You can now see that this transform node is transforming everything upstream of it. Both of the trees, both of the branches going off the merge node. So that's a very important concept to remember, is that a node affects everything above it. So now let's go ahead and desaturate the color of this a little bit. So let's go, but first actually let's match these blacks, the black of the dog to the black of the squirrel. So below the frame hold, go ahead and go to the color menu and create a grade node. And the grade node is specially designed for color matching, which is, a huge thing that we do in compositing, is matching the color of one thing to the color of another thing. And the way it works is we're going to set the black point and the white point of the greyhound, and we're going to remap the white point to the white point of the squirrel and the black point to the black point of the squirrel. So first, let's go look at the greyhound. And in your viewer, slide the gamma control up and slide the gain control up. And now select the color picker and hit Command Shift to draw out a little square over a black area, like that. We've now said these are the blackest pixels in this comp. Now let's go the opposite way, and let's gamma down Now let's go ahead and select the white point color picker and and let's select these pixels over here. So again, hold Command Shift to draw a little box. Hold Command Option Shift to select the color from the node directly above it. Now let's go ahead and hit Y and hit the f-stop to return to the normal color. Now if we look through the grade node, the color has changed slightly. So let's now look at the squirrel, and let's do the same thing. Let's gamma way down, gain way down, and let's set the gain to the white point. This is the color we're going to map the white point of the dog image to. So let's hold Command Shift and select this for the gain. Maybe select this one. Command Shift, Command Shift. Yeah, okay, it's working. They're just blown out. So they are already blown out. They're peaked at 1. Let's go ahead and select a reasonable black point now. So let's go ahead and select the lift color. And let's select this area here, again holding Command Shift to draw a little box. And we've selected lift color. Let's go click on these to bring them back to normal. So what the grade node is doing is it's going to remap. It's remapping this color. And now you can see it's done something weird here in the outside. And because what it's doing is it's also color correcting the alpha channel, even though the alpha channel is not selected here. So what we need to do is we need to unpre-multiply this by the alpha channel. And now the color is only affecting the dog. So now if we go ahead and look here, we can now see that the tonality of this matches the squirrel much better than it did before. So let's go ahead and select this node, and over the node graph press D to disable it and see the difference of what this node is creating. So we're just turning it on and off, and you can see that, yeah, the tonality and the color temperature matches the squirrel much better than before. But now let's say that, you know, this is a ad for nuts and the client actually wants us to desaturate it a little bit. Let's go ahead and go back to the color correction menu and go C to create a color correct node and attach it to the bottom. Now we can grade everything upstream, the dog and the squirrel. In the Ranges tab, if we hover our mouse over, we can see that this yellow line is telling us that this area is in the midpoints, this is in the midpoints, this area is in the highlights, in this area, let's see, this area is in the shadows. We can adjust what's considered midtones and shadows and highlights by moving these control points at the bottom. Now, when we adjust the highlights, it will only adjust these areas in this curve. So let's go ahead and desaturate the highlights a little bit. Or rather, let's make the highlights more red. So you can see it's only color correcting those areas. Let's make the highlights a little bit more blue. That's nice. And let's go ahead and desaturate the overall image. Let's go back to this grade node and brighten up our dog a little bit. So see, once you lay down a node, you can always go back in and tweak it after the fact. So you have a ton of control here. Now, Let's create one more merge node, M for merge, and let's put A over B. So this has an alpha channel, so it's just putting it right over the top. But let's go ahead and change the merge operation and see what it does. Let's do a plus. So by doing a plus, we're adding the values of the color wheel to this image. Let's try a multiply and see what that does. Now we're multiplying it. So anything that was black in the color wheel image is now showing up as black in this image, because of course 0 times any pixel is going to be 0. Let's try a hard light. How about hypot? There we go. Disjointed over is not going to do anything really. Divide from a stencil ought to cut it out, so we could use the alpha channel of A to stencil or mask this out. So stencil will cut the circular hole in it, and a mask will put it in the circle. So let's just go back to plus. And finally, if we want to render this image out, we can go ahead back to this menu and create a write node, or press W. And it's going to bring up, oh, that's a read node. Let's go ahead and press W. And it's created a write node. If we append this write node to the bottom and tell it to write from this node, first we need to tell it what channels we want to write. We can write all the channels into an EXR file, or we can write just the RGBA. Let's go ahead and choose a location. I'm just going to put it on the root level of this and call it test version 001.mov. And this brings up the default further MOV file format. Generally though, you want to change this to Gamma 2.2 or sRGB. Sometimes Rec 709 is in order. You can choose your codec. ProRes 444 is the default. You can certainly choose it to 422. And H.264 in the full version. I believe H.264 is disabled in the non-commercial. And set your frames per second, and then you just want to go ahead and hit render and make sure the frame range of your animation is selected, or the frame range you want to render, that is. Let's go ahead and hit cancel that. Now Command C, Command V, copy this write node, and let me open write to's parameters. If you wanted to write this back to a DNG file, unfortunately DNG is not available, but you could write it to a DPX or an EXR, which is or a TIFF or a JPEG, which are all image sequence file formats. So you want to go ahead and do an underscore and hit, there's two ways to do it. You can hit you can hit present, the present sign, and then 0, and then the number of digits you want, so 4, and then D, so 4 digits, or 6 digits, and that'll make, say, frame 1000 as 001000, whereas 4 will just make it 1000, and then dot DPX, for example. Once you type that in, it'll change the file type to DPX. You'll be able to choose the data type, so 10 bits the default, 12-bit or 16-bit. The transfer type, and the color space, of course, and the default is Cineon. And again, you'll want to hit render. One more tip is, if you close the properties band and the background render, if you just double click on a node with no properties been open, it opens up the properties in a floating window, and you can put them on the second screen or move them around. You can of course have multiple properties open, and you can still twirl them closed. One advantage to having the properties in a floating window is it gives you a cancel button and a close button. So if I were to change the gamma of the dog like this and hit close, it would just close that. Now if I can undo with this here, I can also undo just by hitting Command Z. But if I were to tweak this wildly and then not know how to get back, I could just hit cancel, and it will in fact undo every change that I've made since I opened the node, which is why it reverted back to this gamma 3.3, because that's where it was at when I opened the node. So let's go ahead, and we multiplied it up a little bit. Now let's hit close. Now let's reopen it, and let's just tweak stuff wildly. And you know, this is not where I want to be at all, right? This is not, we totally broke this. This is not where we want to be at all. If we just hit cancel, again, it reverts to exactly where it was when you open the node. Also, to get any window back, you can just go to Windows. So click on the little box and go down to Windows, and you can again tell it to put the properties band there. You can have, I think you can only have one properties band open. So yeah, you can only have one properties band open, and you can also only have one node graph open. So again, let's go down to Windows, Properties, and you can also open scopes, so a histogram, a waveform, and a vector, and various other windows that you may need that we'll probably cover in more depth later. So I hope that was informative. Basic workflow and basic nodes of Nuke. Again, to review: R for read, W for write, B creates a blur node, T creates a transform node, M creates a merge node, K for copy, C for color correct, and G for grade. And then of course read and write, W for write and R for read. And these are the most basic nodes, and that's why they all have keyboard shortcuts. In the next class, we'll look at actually doing something useful, compositing, not some silly mashup of images like this, but we're actually going to look at painting out some man-made stuff from a nature trail and making it look more wild and adding a deer into the background. So until then, happy comping.